My entitled good-for-nothing niece thinks she deserves more than my son. I told her I'd never love her like I love him. When I, 43, was 18 and when my sister, 47, was 22 at the time I had my nephew, let's call him Luke, with her then boyfriend, now husband. My sister and her husband didn't have any interest in Luke when he was born, so I took the role of taking care of him. I got my grandmother, she's an angel, to watch him while I was in my last year of high school in exchange for me cleaning and cooking for her on the weekends. My parents weren't much help either. They would give me about $100 a month for Luke, and if you have a kid then you know it's not much. Me and my grandmother were the only ones to take care of him. A year after I graduated from high school I was kicked out with my nephew because my parents, sister, and her husband didn't want to deal with us anymore. My sister said she wished she never gave birth to him. I immediately went to my grandmother and we went to a family law attorney and I got custody of him, and my sister and her husband signed their rights to me. I lived with my grandmother, and when I went to community college and my part-time job she watched my son, Luke. It was a lot of work, especially when my grandmother passed away when my son was 6. My grandmother left 90% of her things to me in her will, which caused my parents and sister to reach out to me under false intentions to meet my son and I to reconnect. That didn't last long and I told them they could either act right or never see us again. My dad decided to actually reconnect with my son and I, and now we're close. While my mom and I don't really talk much, but she treats Luke nice. When Luke was 8, both me and my sister became pregnant, and that's when my sister decided she wanted my son back and started to tell him that me and my husband wouldn't love him anymore once my actual son came along. My husband met my son when he was 5 and we were already together for a year before he met my son. My husband treats Luke like his, and we got married when my son was 7 and adopted him when he was 9, with my son's permission. We found out that my sister was saying this when one day he broke down crying asking us not to leave him after we told him that would never happen. He explained what my sister and her husband were saying. Luke knows that he's not my biological son, but he is my son. After that I cut contact with my sister and her husband again and did family therapy and individual therapy for my son. When I had my son, 1 pregnancy, 2 children, I made it clear that our love for him, Luke, didn't change. When my sister reached out about 2 years later I decided to go low contact with her with the okay with my son and husband. My husband and I live comfortably while my sister and her husband struggle sometimes financially. My kids did extracurricular activities, got the presents they wanted, and went on one big family trip in the summer, while my sister and her husband couldn't afford much. So when my niece was around 9 my sister started making comments about how I needed to pay for this or that for my niece, but I told her it wasn't my job. I gave my niece the gifts she wanted, took her out from time to time, but nowhere near how I would treat my own kids. Now my son, second, is turning 17 and my husband and I were talking about getting him a cheap starter car. We did the same for Luke when he was 17. My niece is also turning 17 and apparently my sister told her she was going to get a car too. The thing is my sister can't afford to buy her a car, so she asked me to, but I told her I wasn't going to buy her a car, that I didn't promise her one and that it's not my job to get her one. My sister then got mad and didn't talk to me for a while. When my son's 17th birthday came around we surprised him with a car. My niece then called me a couple of days later screaming and crying asking me why I hate her and why I can't treat her the same as her brother. I calmly told her things were different. Her brother is my son while she is my niece. I'm her aunt and nothing more. That as an aunt my job was birthday presents, Christmas presents, and showing up when it mattered. That was it. That her brother will always be more to me than she'll ever be. Then my niece started yelling at me again, telling me that I'm being unfair, and hung up. My sister then called me to berate me about how I need to do more. I told her if she wouldn't have promised a car to her or my money to my niece, no, this wouldn't have happened. It's been a couple of days and I'm getting calls from some family and some of my sister's friends calling me a beach and some other things. I do feel bad because my kids did grow up with more and I guess I could have helped more.